This is ST-321, code clearance blue. We're starting our approach to deactivate the security shield.
Hi, I'm Paul and I'm with my mate James, and welcome to Code Clearance Blue, a show where we discuss all things Star Wars from our home here in the UK.
We would be honoured if you would join us.
I've been looking forward to this.
Right, well, we've got a special guest on Code Clearance Blue for this episode. We're really thrilled to have someone who, well, I mean, is described as a vile gangster. So, I don't know, hold on to your hats maybe. But me and Paolo are very, very honoured to welcome the one, the only Toby Philpott onto the show. Toby, how are you, sir?
I'm good, thank you.
Good stuff, good stuff. So for those who might not know, you worked on Return of the Jedi, but you've had a film career that's spanned about a decade or so, and it's taken in some of the most culturally significant films of certainly more my and Paolo's generation. You worked on the likes of The Dark Crystal, Labyrinth, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and of course Return of the Jedi. Just wanted to get a semblance of how you sort of got to become into the creative industry to start with, I guess. You know, where did it all kick off?
Well, it's interesting because I've got friends in the film business who, planned to be in the film business and are still in the film business 20 years later. I actually did half a dozen movies in that, like 7 or 8 years, but I hadn't planned to be in the film business. And certainly when CGI came in and productions moved abroad and so on, my short film career, it kind of evaporated, because if they make Lord of the Rings in New Zealand, they might fly out cinematographers or principal actors, but mostly they're going to hire local talent, of course. And I just got lucky. I happened to get into the film business when London was the focal point. All the American directors were working here: Spielberg, Kubrick, Jim Henson, you name them. People were filming in London. It was just a period, Yeah. And also, it was a time of practical effects. It was just kind of in fashion. Jim Henson had started it mostly. But if you think of, for instance, Yoda, this was an early attempt to do an alien creature, not just as a man with a funny head and funny hands, like most aliens in Doctor Who and Star Trek were just, humans with a mask. And Yoda was an early attempt to say, can we make something really alien, really kind of odd, but it's nothing like the Muppet puppets, for instance, where you have suspension of disbelief. Yes, you believe in Miss Piggy and Fozzie Bear and Kermit, but they're puppets. I mean, underneath it all, that they're felt.
Yeah.
So Yoda was the first kind of real attempt to make a creature that is living and breathing. It never even occurs to you when you watch him. You don't think, is that a little man in a mask? Is that a puppet? Yoda is alive. And it's the magic of puppets. It's Frank Oz doing it, and Frank trained with Jim. But I think of Yoda as kind of the breakthrough moment when George Lucas and people went, aha, wow. And to me, The Dark Crystal was then a kind of showcase of what else might be possible using modern animatronics. I mean, later on you get Gremlins and you get all sorts of other things, but The Dark Crystal was Jim's dream to make a puppet movie, but not like the Muppet movies, but a puppet movie where you don't think of the word puppets, but you do think of the word alien, that they are not just funny humanoid things, but you have no scale because there are no human beings in The Dark Crystal. You have no scale. You don't have any sense of how big or small anything is. If you took, for instance, Jen and Kira as the humanoids, then the Gartham are huge, In fact, the Gartham is just me in a big shell, but you don't know that. It could be as big as the Rancor, and of course, Jim's original vision was, although we think of him as a populist and a comedian and all that, he's actually a surrealist to me. Even his early films are really experimental, and he never stopped pushing the limits of what was possible. So as I say, Dark Crystal was my first ever movie. I hadn't planned to be in the movie business. What they auditioned for was people to operate the big creatures, not the hand puppets, but the big creatures, because simply the Muppet people didn't want to work in such uncomfortable positions. To do the Mystics, you're in a deep squat. With the Gotham, you're carrying an 80-pound, rucksack shell thing on your back. So they hired. The advertisement actually said, I think something like, acrobats, dancers, mimes wanted to operate big creatures. So of course, it's not like you were drawing on a pool of people that were already out there doing that.
Yeah.
So it was a talent call for people willing to be adventurous and experimental and to give it a go. As it happened, I just spent 10 years as an acrobat. I mean, to jump backwards, before doing the film business, I was a street performer, and I'd started off as a juggler. Then I added acrobatics and mime and mask work, and I did a bit of magic and unicycle and all sorts. But over the 10-year period, I'd been training in all sorts of different things. So I was, one, a quick learner, two, versatile, if you want, and not frightened of the idea of going in to try something that no one had ever done before. That was. Plus, on top of that, my dad was a puppeteer. So when I was a kid, it wasn't that odd to me. The puppet world was very familiar. He was a glove puppeteer, but amongst his friends, there were marionette people and all kinds of interesting folk that I met. So I wasn't frightened of the idea of puppets. I didn't become a puppeteer. I didn't want to follow in my dad's footsteps. Which is why I went off into circusy things. That was my own thing. But as I say, I wasn't frightened of the idea of puppets. So when the workshop came, when they accepted that I had applied, and I mean, they had lots of applications from all kinds of people. But I mean, people trained in puppeteering, for instance, might not be suitable, because doing big creatures in uncomfortable positions was not really made for people who do string puppets, for instance. So it wasn't a puppeteer call. It was a call for, as I say, physical people. And it also meant that you couldn't go and do your audition with a piece, because no one was doing these things. So the way they auditioned us was like this. They would draw people in, almost like a workshop. They'd get 20 people into a room. Jim and Frank and a couple of other people would be there. And they had a couple of heads and masks and gloves and bits and pieces, but nothing special. And they just ran us through being alien. Can you offer us an alien? Can you offer us strange positions? I mean, you'd put a head on your hand, for instance, and they say, "No, we want you to be asleep, and then wake up, look around, and then walk off." And they were just watching how people took direction, how people could improvise, and so on. And I felt really at home in this. You can imagine, I'd been doing clown workshops, I'd been doing mime. I wasn't frightened of this. Whereas some of the dancers were going, "Oh, wait a minute, hang on, I need moves. I need to be told what to do."
Sure.
And they had about 200 people, and they did half a dozen of these workshops. Well, from my point of view, I was going, I'm getting a free workshop in puppetry with Jim Henson and Frank Oz for free. I wasn't frightened. I didn't expect to get the job, but I sort of thought, I'm actually what they were looking for. I'm very suitable for this. This feels great. So being relaxed, I think I did better than I might have done any other kind of audition. I'd been to, dance auditions and stuff, and just got terrified and shaky and couldn't, auditions are designed to filter people out. So if someone tried to choreograph you in a dance, they can make one where you end up with your left arm and left leg going together, and, they can spot that you can't do it. Whereas this one, I felt really at home. So it went down from, 100 people to 50 people to 20 people. The last 20, when they recalled us, they said, "Right, we're picking 10 of you." It was very American, this competitive thing, because you're also going to be working together. So you actually want to cooperate and help each other. But nevertheless, in the last 20, they said, "We're picking 10 of you. 4 of you will go straight into pre-production. and the other 6 will come back when we start shooting. So it was kind of, competitive, this last workshop. And in the 20, I got into the 10. And in the 10, I was picked to be one of the 4. So I was going, wow, I'm right in there. I'm going to go straight into being, properly paid. As it happens, I then had a back injury. We were doing some training and stuff like that. Something happened with my back. I won't go into it, but essentially I had to pull out and go, hey, listen, I'll be all right in March. This was like November or something.
Yeah.
I can be in the 6, but I can't, in all honesty, I can't offer you my own full strength right now. So I pulled out, and Simon Williamson went into that group of 4. I was in agony. I went through pain and went through the winter. I was really demoralized because you can imagine, I've got the gig.
Yeah.
Injury. But in March, they recalled me, bless them. They didn't say, oh, he's the man with the bad back, we don't need him. So they called me in, and I was fit and I was fine. So we shot Dark Crystal for a few months. I can't remember exactly, but a few months, all on really good, film pay and so on. We started by doing the Mystics and the Garthing, which we'd been training for, and which were uncomfortable. But we also got puppetry workshops so that we could do background creatures like the pod people and so on. I don't want to go into too much detail in case people haven't seen Dark Crystal, but essentially, you got to bear in mind, this is all puppets. Everything is a puppet in this. And none of them are simple puppets like Kermit, which is, basically a sock and ping pong balls.
Yeah.
All these creatures breathe and blink, and they are always at least 3 and sometimes 4 people to operate them. So each of the Muppet people got 2 or 3 of us supplementary puppeteer people on their team. Now, somehow I ended up on Jim Henson's team. I'd love to flatter myself and think that he picked the best. It's quite possible it's the other way around, because he was such a modest man. He might have let everyone else pick, and then, like the couple of kids left in school that no one wants on their football team, it might have been me, and you end up with him, So I really don't know. I'm not flattering myself. I think a bit of it is to do with temperament as well, because if you're trying to work together, 2 or 3 of you are trying to make one creature happen, it helps if you've got the same kind of temperament. And me and Robbie Barnett were the people on Jim's team. Now, Robbie Barnett, after puppeteering, he'd been a clown and he'd been a stilt walker and stuff. But after working on that, he went off to Tibet, working with the Dalai Lama. He's now, an emissary for Tibetan Buddhism and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, another gentle soul. Now, you've got to bear in mind, Jim was, I don't like the word spiritual, but he was kind of an introvert, and he was kind of a little bit mystical too. So although I'm being noisy now, my dad was a theosophist, so I'm a lifelong vegetarian and atheist, Buddhist, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So it's possible that he picked me and Robbie because we had similar temperaments. If you think some of the loud Americans picked the more loud, and I remember, I forget exactly who, but one of the more loud Americans definitely had the Turkish dancer that was one of our people who loved being a Garthim. He was really physical,
Yeah.
Whereas, as I say, working with Jim was great. Essentially, what my job was is pretty silly. But on Jen and the Ritual Master and the Dying Emperor and all that sort of stuff, I'd essentially be doing the other hand. So if Jim's right hand is doing the head and his left hand is operating the left arm of the creature, then I'm in Jim's armpit working the right hand. Or sometimes I'd be around behind, operating the eyes, blinking and looking left and right and all that.
Yeah.
But essentially, it was almost telepathic work, because Jim was directing the movie as well as running his own company and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So while we're doing lighting and sound and everything else, most of the other Garthim and Skeksis and so on, they would all be rehearsing their moves. When I turn my head, move the eyes and so on. Whereas with Jim, he's talking to the lighting man and thing, and me and Robbie would just patiently sit there, and then Jim would just come back to us and go, right, this is what we're going to do. And we get almost no rehearsal. It was like, as I say, it was almost telepathic. But he was also he knew how hard it was, what he was asking us to do. He never, ever I don't remember ever being given negative criticism. It was never wrong or don't do that. And you're on a film set. If you screw up a scene, everybody has to reset and do it again for a second take. That means everybody. There's 100 people on the set, and all of them have got to reset. All the puppeteers and the lighting man and everybody. So it's pretty tense. Especially if you're in the focal point. But Jim was he created it. He made a creative atmosphere. Everyone I know loved working for him. He would never say wrong. He might say, that's not quite what I imagined. Try this or something, but he never ever said that I'd screwed up a shot.
Yeah. I suppose because he's under pressure as well. Because he was
under immense pressure. As I say, he's doing all of it. He's performing with less rehearsal than anyone else. Yeah. And he's playing focal characters. Yeah. He was just such a lovely man to work with and work for. God, sorry, I'm kind of babbling on now, but
no, it's great. I mean, we love listening. It's brilliant.
Well, I didn't plan to be in the film business, right? Yeah. And I didn't plan to be a puppeteer.
Yeah.
But my dad died in 78, and by 79, I'm a puppeteer working for Jim Henson.
Yeah, wow.
Like, thanks, Dad.
Yeah.
He would have been proud, I'm sure.
He would have been proud, yeah.
Absolutely.
But yeah, as I say, that was my initiation into film.
Yeah.
I'd done a couple of little bits of telly, but pretty much like juggling on Play School. I mean, and TV is very different from filming. TV, they call you in, for instance, for Play School. They say, we've got an hour and we've got to produce a 15-minute program.
Yeah.
Right. So that you don't get retakes. Ideally, if you can do it all in one shot, that's it. Whereas on filming, you're making, if you're lucky, 3 minutes of film a day.
Yeah.
For 5 months to make an hour and a half movie, So the attention to detail is completely different on movies. And the expense, of course, is an extremely expensive process.
Yeah.
Everything's quicker now because you could film on digital stock, and back then we're still filming. Then the film is being sent off to a chemist.
Yeah.
And then it comes back the following day. And then they can watch the rushes to see if yesterday they got the shots they wanted.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which mostly works, but every now and then there's a hair in the gate, so you see it in the thing. Or there was one classic shot where all the mystics are walking across the skyline, and this was a location shot out. We'd been driven out there before the dawn, got in the costumes, and then all trudged across this hillside with the sun coming up, which was fantastic. It was absolutely fantastic, and it looked fantastic. And we were allowed to watch the rushes. Jim was very clear. Mostly in films, it's only the directors and producers that watch the rushes, obviously editing and all that. But Jim had this thing that you could learn a lot from watching the rushes. So we were invited after work every day to go and see the rushes for the day before. It wasn't compulsory. If you wanted to go home at 6 o'clock, you could. But nearly everybody, mostly, would go and watch the rushes. Not out of politeness, because it's really intriguing to see what you've achieved.
Yeah.
When you're inside a mystic, you have no idea what the shot was.
I was going to say you just did a big cloth in a very awkward position most of the time.
Yeah. So you had
no idea what's going on,
and you couldn't get out and even watch the little video playback, because they did have a little video camera on just for a quick trick. But so we'd go to rushes. So when this mystic shot came up, we went for the sunrise and the silhouettes, and then there was a blue line down it, a scratch down the negative.
Oh man!
And they can't eliminate. I mean, nowadays they'd probably digitally remove it, but in 1980 you couldn't do this. We literally had to go out the following morning before dawn and do it again. So the one in the movie is the second take. You know what I mean? So it's quite amazing. The process of filming was fantastic. And I think there's another silly one that you may remember if you know, because I'm playing the alchemist. My mystic is twinned with the scientist, Skeksis. So when the scientist falls into the burning pit, as he does, the alchemist disappears in a puff of smoke. This is because we're twinned, they're halves of the same creature and all that. Now, to disappear in a puff of smoke, what you've got is a high shot of the mystics walking towards the castle. And then at some point, mine in the middle just disappears. And they all sort of stop and look around and go, what happened to him? Oh, and then they walk on. Again, it would probably be easier now with green screen and CGI and so on. But the way we actually did that was very, very simple. We literally walked along until somebody shouted, stop. Then all the guys had to freeze, and I had to jump up clumsily in my costume and run out of shot before they restarted the camera. Now, you imagine I couldn't even stand up straight when you're in that costume. You're dragging a 6-foot tail. You've got a head on all that. So, and I know that all the other guys are frozen, going, get a move on, Toby, get off the away. I'm trying to get out without bumping into anybody or, knocking anything. It looks so simple when you see it on the screen, but the outtakes of that would be hilarious if anyone's got the.
I mean, Paolo and I we studied together at college and university in media, and that sounds like some of the special effects we would use on in our little projects that we'd make, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, it's high budget, but the technology just was different. That's how long ago it was. Yeah. And because Jim wanted nearly everything to be real, to be practical effects, there are one or two little digital thingies in there, but essentially we're trying to do it for real, and it looks different. It looks real. Yeah. I mean, you believe it, you buy it. It was a very important thing for him that it makes it credible. I mean, the remake they've done for TV, I was very worried about. I thought, it just won't be practical effects. They did pretty good. They did proper puppeteering, but of course they could use green screen and they could, do some digital editing. They could add tongues to the Skeksis and all sorts of things, that we just couldn't do. Ours are really clunky. I mean, the radio controls that nowadays they have very sophisticated ones. One person can operate a whole face, eyes, eyebrows, and so on. Whereas ours were, I don't know what you call, like on a camera release or like on a bike brake,
like shutter.
Yeah.
Flicker.
That's how we're doing blinking, for instance.
Yeah.
So you have to go blink.
Yeah.
It's not easy because blinking's actually quite a quick thing. Yeah. And you had to set these things so that you decide, do you set them open then you shut them, but they prefer to be open? Or do you have them shut and you hold them open and, So the guys in the workshops were doing lots of experimenting with this stuff. And then in order to perform them and rehearse with them, we did a lot of, this is where the mime training came in. We would do a lot of, if you stare too much, you become robotic. If you blink too much, you look nervous. But if you're threatening, for instance, you just narrow your eyes just a little bit, you the squint. And, it's when do you blink? For instance, you blink when you turn your head because your body decides if it's going to be blurry, I might as well have a quick blink in there while I move. Mm-hmm. So this is what makes these creatures really come to life. You find that spontaneously you blink. If you turn your head, you don't have to think about blinking. Your body just takes the opportunity. Yeah. It's not every time. No. But we would analyze these things. And then, of course, I'd have to watch Jim's, because when we're performing, we also had little monitors, either on the floor near us or something. Yeah. But it came from their TV experience of making Muppets really quickly, of course, that they would be able to see their own performance through the lens. This is a very special setup to have not just a separate video camera, but to actually see what the shot is as it's being seen through the camera. I say that because on Return of the Jedi, we didn't get that. They were not a puppet crew. And they were not going to set something specially up for Jabba. They're going to film the way they used to, because you have to do different lighting and stuff. If there's two cameras taking energy, it's all. I mean, Jim's thing was a very specialist way of doing it. But I could see when I'm in his armpit, for instance, I could see whether my hand is in or out of frame. Because it matters if he's performing and I want to match him or whatever. Yeah. So, we could see what we were doing a bit, if you see what I mean. But only when puppeteering the Skeksis and those kind of creatures.
I was going to ask Toby actually, because you obviously mentioned Frank Oz, you mentioned Simon Williamson earlier as well. Did you guys kind of just get like airlifted out of the Dark Crystal production over to Jedi, or did someone act as a go-between, or how did you get involved in that?
People applied for the job. It's always who you know.
Yeah.
So obviously people talent spotting could go, well, these guys know what they're doing. They've just done 5 months filming with Jim, so they're not frightened of a film studio. They're good at creatures. So there was you'd have to literally talk to the other guys, because for me it was very odd. I know people like John Coppinger, who sculpted Jabba, for instance. He had heard the jobs were coming up as a builder, not as a performer. And he says to me that everyone was putting in their applications and he deliberately left it till last so his would be on top of the pile, you know. And he, as I say, he got the job as a sculptor. Now, he had never done films. He'd been a sculptor for the Natural History Museum. He'd been making dodos and dinosaurs and things. But he was talent spotted by Jim, and then talent spotted by Stuart Freeborn. So yes, there was a big crossover, but it wasn't simply that they rehired everybody.
Right.
What happened to me was that I got called into the office. I didn't apply for anything. I got called into an office where a classic producer, you know, the big man with the cigar,
Yeah.
kind of said, "We've been watching you doing this stuff," which was nonsense, but, you know, flattering. And he said, "And we've got this big creature that we wonder if you'd be interested in working in it." And I went, yeah. Well, you know, I thought I'd got, you know, I'm in the business now, so
Yeah.
here's the next job. So I didn't audition for it or anything. I mean, he literally said, "And it's a 2-person puppet. So is there anyone that you'd like to work with?" Now, if I'd been thinking clearly, I probably would have picked one of the Dark Crystal guys. But I was still thinking of it as an opportunity to get other friends of mine from fringe theatre into the film business. So I said, well, there's a couple of puppeteers I know, Richard Robinson and Andy Cunningham, and people that might be interested. And they said, "Oh, okay, yeah, we'll give them work. Anybody else?" And it kind of, they fenced around for a bit. And eventually they said, would you be willing to work with David Barclay? And I said, "Oh yeah, I love Dave. You know, he's a friend of mine. His parents were puppeteers. They knew my dad, and he knew my dad better than I did, I think." So they said, "Oh, great, but he hasn't got an equity card. You know, is that going to be a problem?" And I said, "No. I mean, I'm not that unionish.
Yeah.
You know, he's a perfect talent for it. He's a builder instead of a performer." I said, "Get him an equity card. That's simple." Especially if you think about it, because the Muppet people had an exception for being Americans. They didn't have equity cards.
No.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the long version. The short version is years later, I go to a convention and there's Dave, and I haven't seen him for 15 years or something. And I start telling this story to one of the fans, and Dave turned to me and said, "That's not how it was." And I said, "What?" And he went, "I got you the job," he said. "They hired me and asked me who I wanted as a sidekick." And I said, "You."
Oh.
All this nonsense had been the film producers worrying about me being a union person, going, "I'm not working with him."
Right.
The film business is full of all this stupid, secretive nonsense. You know what I mean? It's like, just if they could have just told me that. You know what I mean? Instead of having a couple of meetings about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, apparently they'd originally asked Dave to help with the sculpting and all that sort of stuff, but because he was working for Jim Henson, he couldn't help. He said, "I'm busy. I'm contracted to Jim, and I can't do the building."
Yeah. Right.
So he then went to Jim and said, "You know, they've offered me this gig. You know, it's a really good one on the next film." And Jim said, "Well, what have you? You know, what do you still owe me, if you see what I mean?" And Dave explained what he had to do, and Jim said, "Well, if you can finish all that, I'll let you go. You know, as soon as you've finished."
Right.
So Dave went back to the Jabba people and he said, "I can't do the building." They said, "Well, do you want to be the chief puppeteer then?" It's just weird, you know. I mean, it's a mixture of luck and talent, and
yeah, all coming together.
So yeah, it's all very mysterious how I got. But of course, I still thought this was just like a Garth thing or something. I just thought it was a big creature. It's going to have a 3-minute scene. I had no idea that it was going to be Jabba's palace and that we were going to be on screen for 20 minutes as the feature player, as to play scenes with every single one of the principals, for instance.
So can you recall the first time you saw the finished puppet then, and you guys had to get stuck in sort of learning how to move it before cameras started rolling?
About a week before the camera started rolling.
Only a week?
Well, we saw it being built. We went for fittings. They sculpted our arms to fit the gloves, and
Of course, right. Yeah.
we had a little go with the squirt. And that's a bit heavy. Could you lighten that? Can you? So we were there for fittings, off and on. But he literally wasn't really finished until about a week before, because they had to move into place and do the final work with him on the days in the palace in whatever Studio 8 or whatever it was. They were still, they'd only just finished painting him and all that sort of stuff. So although we knew roughly how he worked, we hadn't really got a lot of rehearsal done. And we practiced outside. We'd stand shoulder to shoulder and do left hand, right hand, and how do you pull a chain? Because you can't actually reach. We couldn't reach to hand each other things, for instance. So Jabba couldn't pass things from hand to hand, but with a chain you can work moves out. So we did some thinking about it, but in terms of actually climbing in and going for it. Again, a bit like we're working with Jim, more or less in at the deep end, because they weren't even going to pick up shots and background shots. I mean, it's Jabba's palace, and they wanted to get on with shooting Jabba. Of course, he's going to be in every scene, even if he's in the background of a shot, like for the dancing and the band playing and all that. He's going to be doing stuff. So yeah, I really don't know exactly how much practice we had, but you've got to understand, first of all, we couldn't really see what we're doing, because unlike Jim's setup, where you know what the shot is, whether you're close up or in the frame. When we said we can't see anything at all in there, they put a CCTV camera up in the roof, pointing at Jabba. So that's all right. I mean, at least we could see each other and wave our hands and check that we're with it. But it was black and white and grainy, and we had a camera hanging off our chest, about a 4-inch square CCTV. So yes, we could see Jabba, but first of all, we had no idea if it was a close-up. We didn't know if Leia was in the shot. We didn't know anything like that. Almost all you're seeing us do is basically working blind, basically. And
given his occupation, I quite like the thought of him being on a grainy CCTV camera.
Yeah. But it means we weren't seeing through the lens. And in terms of expressions and things, we're basically doing the big moves. If you think about it, I'm doing the left hand, I'm moving the head around with my body I'm on the revolve, so I can swing it around a bit. And my right hand goes inside the tongue when it's needed. Dave is doing the dialogue because he's doing the mouse, and he's doing the dialogue in English because that's what we were given, the script. We didn't know about the Huttese thing. And he's also doing the right hand. So we've got hand coordination stuff. We've got all the big body moves. But these detailed animatronic things which we had evolved on Dark Crystal, like the eyes, were being operated by a couple of the builders outside with radio controls. So they were the only ones on the set who could really see what the performance looked like. And we had a headset, we're talking to them. I'd say I'm turning the head to the left. So you've got this thing I told you about blinking when you move the head and that kind of stuff. We already knew this kind of stuff. But you started to do it. And Jabba's eyes were very sophisticated. I mean, they had pupils that expanded and contracted and all that sort of stuff. So they don't get much credit, the builders. Not only did they do a fantastic job of building him, but they're actually puppeteering in the shots. And it all gets played down a little bit, and puppeteers get the credit. But I'm just bringing him to life. When I walked in the morning and Jabba's sitting there, he already dominates the room.
Yeah.
That's without anybody inside him. He just looks
Yeah.
like he's asleep, you know. So all we're doing is bringing him to life. But I'm not putting us down either. But bear in mind that the builders were also on the set, and importantly, giving us feedback so that we would say, Richard Marquand didn't speak to us too much. He mostly spoke to our eye guys and said, can you get them to give me a big laugh, for instance? And we'd go, ho, ho, ho. And the guys would go, that's hardly showing because of all the blubber and so we suddenly were flinging ourselves around and, and they go, yeah, that's good. And you go, yeah. You've got to imagine inside it was hilarious sometimes what we were doing. But so it was very much a team effort. Now,
sorry to interrupt. Can I just throw? Was it Jez Harris that did the eyes?
Yes, as far as I know, he was the main person behind it because they are quite complicated. I've never quite worked out what all the 6 guys did. I mean, it was quite a complicated thing. There's a hard shell of fiberglass, then there's airbags over it, and then there's a latex skin over the top. Now, the latex skin was so big that it has to be baked in an oven or something. And John Coppinger said to me that after he'd sculpted it and then they'd taken the latex off, it was baked in a room. They basically put it in a room and cranked the room temperature up with the radiators and everything to whatever it is, fix the latex, cook it, whatever it is.
Yeah.
As I say, I don't do building.
Yeah.
But it was a very sophisticated and complicated puppet, and expensive, of course.
Yeah.
If you think about it, when I sign photos for Jabba, I normally say Jabba's left-hand man or whatever, just because I don't like signing Jabba the Hutt because it sort of implies that I'm it, and I like to say I'm a part of it. Doesn't matter how Jabba put it. But also, if you do a complete rundown, I mean, in wide shops, we had a tail. So then we'd have Mike Edmonds behind us, operating the tail. And he had a slightly bigger screen, but it was still just the nasty CCTV shot. He still didn't see through the lens. But there's 3, well, Phil Tippett designed it. Stuart Freeborn led the crew. There's 6 builders. That's 8 already. 3 puppeteers. That's 11. So you've got a football team now.
Yeah.
And that's before Ben Burt putting the sounds on, Larry Ward putting the voice on. Well, there's a couple of others. Mike Quinn helped bulge the eyes when he was dying. Howie, I think he did the burp. So that's 4 more. So now you've got a rugby team.
Yeah.
So, if you want a full Jabba signing, it really is about 15 people.
I've got an 8x10 on the go at the moment, which it's got yourself, John, Dave, Mike, and Ben Burt on it at the moment. So I'm a third of the way there.
Yeah, no, I mean that is the core crew. I mean, I'm not dismissing the fact, but when people are completists, you go, yeah, good luck.
Let us know if you got a lead on Stuart, won't you?
Well, yeah.
Bless him.
It's one of those things. You can go either way. You can say me and Dave did Jabba, which is the way some people think of it. Like a double act. Whereas I think of it as 15.
So obviously you must have had a few pressure because obviously the left hand's quite prominent, isn't it? In a lot of those shots, and obviously
I get more of the moves because the right hand's over the tail, over the body.
Yeah, and
plus Dave is concentrating on doing the actual the voice acting.
Yeah,
I mean, I think he knew it was a guide track, and that it would probably get tweaked. But I think secretly he would have loved it if they'd taken his voice and just put the echo on and the boom, and we didn't know they were actually going to translate it because. As I say, we had a script in English.
Yeah.
And we didn't have a whole script, of course. They only gave us our pages and they took them back afterwards. They're very, very secretive.
I was going to say, yeah.
But I think because David helped with Yoda briefly, I think he knew about putting a guide track down, which might get dubbed later. For instance, Frank Oz did do the voice, but there are probably moments when he's gone in and redone it, looped it later,
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, it certainly works with the Hutties. But I didn't think in a popular film they would put in a foreign language with subtitles.
Yeah.
I mean, interestingly, Dark Crystal was originally conceived not to have English in it either. Do you know that it was not only going to be so alien that there were no humans to measure it by, but they were all going to have their own secret language.
Oh, wow.
The pod people and the Skeksis and all that. I think George or somebody said to Jim, that's really, really going to, you're really testing your audience.
Yeah. Yeah.
We might have to make it a little bit easier. So, which is why it starts with, long time ago, far, far away, all very Star Warsy. And as I say, the Skeksis speak English and the Mystics speak English as well, although they don't speak very much. But
because you said earlier about how obviously Yoda had come out in 1980 in The Empire Strikes Back. So people were kind of like ready to believe that, okay, yeah, look, it might look like a puppet, but it looks like a real alien or a real person.
Yeah.
Did you find that on the set of Return of the Jedi as well? Because I think Frank Oz said himself in an interview that a major reason why Yoda worked so well is because Mark Hamill bought into it so much.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Was it like that on the set of Jedi with everyone mixing in?
Yes. I mean, first of all, because Jabba was so convincing. I mean, he's not a little puppet. He had a lot of presence. When you came in, there he was. Yeah. And when you brought him to life and he starts talking to you, oi,
Yeah.
Plus, we said to Richard Markman, for instance, please don't say, "Can you move the left hand?" Toby, please talk to Jabba as though it's, you've got Marlon Brando.
Yeah.
Direct him like, I want you to be angry and then punch that guy and whatever.
Brilliant.
And we got Markman to talk to us directly like that. When he wasn't talking to the eye guys, sometimes he would give them feedback. But when he was talking directly to us, when he had a microphone to get to our headphones, he would say, "Jabba, I want you to," and we got him doing that to the point where I think he started believing it. The reason we know is because there was a day when I think he said, "So could you look that way?" And we said, "We're not actually looking through the eyes. We can't. When you point, we can't see which way you're pointing." And that's when you've got him.
Yeah.
When he's actually talking to you.
Yeah, because he's just obviously being like, "Just look that way for us, Jabs." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And,
yeah. And so, in the same way, acting with Princess Leia when she's the slave, when she's Boosh, it's different because she's standing further away.
Yeah,
she's not saying proper lines because she's got a mask on. It's all going to be linked later. In the outtakes, you'll see her just ad-libbing. You can tell that slimy creature that you can just do what you like.
Yeah,
it's like Darth Vader. She knows that her lines don't matter.
Yeah.
Right. Beyond feeding us, roughly what the lines are. And poor old Dave just had to deal with that and just do our lines as it happens. All that got later. But certainly when she was slave Leia, we mostly just chatted to her as Jabba, because you can't shout through the wall, Carrie.
Yeah.
You can't. So it's just easy to say, "Good morning, Miss Fisher," and just because it's all practice for us.
Yes.
And for her, it brings it to life. It just made it easier for the actors. Certainly compared to green screen and CGI and stuff, it's three-dimensional. I mean, the whole palace is really there.
Yeah.
All the entourage are really there. Bib Fortuna, he's been in makeup for 3 hours. He came in at 6 and came on the set at 9 with the red contact lenses and all the thing.
His eyes bleeding.
Yeah. I never saw Mike. I never saw Mike until a convention in Paris in 2003 or something like that.
Wow.
I went, "Oh, it's Mike Carter." Oh, he'd never seen me because I'd always been inside Jabba, and I'd never seen him because he'd been in makeup. So
amazing.
But we would occasionally go out and talk to them. I mean, if there was something difficult going on, I'd go out and we had to go out and talk to Carrie about the chain, for instance. Are we hurting you? And she went, no, you've got to give me some resistance. I don't want it soft. I need something to fight against. So
yeah.
I'll look after myself. I'll let you know if it's bad.
Yeah.
But please make it look a bit don't jerk it, obviously, but give me something to fight with.
Yeah.
She was very game, very very sporting. Given that it's not a stunt double, it's the real person.
Yeah, fair play.
It's
Because
very
I was going to
famous.
ask you, do you have any memories of the sort of the big three? Because they were all on that set at one point or another. And
Yeah.
it's widely documented that obviously Harrison Ford had kind of checked out of doing Star Wars by that point. But what were they like to sort of work with on set?
Well, Carrie was fantastic. Very sporting, very funny, and I mean, I never saw her she, given that she was about 23, she's in a bikini in front of 100 geezers,
Yeah.
in a freezing cold aircraft hangar, because it was a very, very cold winter that winter. So going from freezing to when the lights are on and it's baking. No, whenever I went out to talk to her, she's there in a towel and robe going, Jesus,
Oh,
you know. But yeah, when we were acting with Mark, we didn't really go and talk to him too much, because we were talking to him as Jabba, so the lines were quite specifically dialogue, which he was doing. He was acting properly, so Dave was acting properly. This is not like Boosh when she was goofing about.
yeah.
So that was a straight acting job. That was like him talking to us. And if Dave got it wrong, he'd say, "I'm sorry, I've forgotten the words." You know what I mean? It's like you're still playing the character the whole way through.
Yeah.
And again, for Mark, that made it much easier. We didn't really get to act with Harrison Ford. Well, I mean, we did, but first of all, she goes to rescue him out of the thing, and he collapses. Then you hear Jabba's laugh, and then he's going, I know that laugh and all that, and the curtains open. By this time, of course, we're a long way away from those two.
Focus,
And we are just doing the words, and because it's a wide shot, I am just doing the gestures. That's not a thing. So we again respectfully act with him in doing the words properly and things. But we know we're not the main part of that scene, really. But then when when a Gamorrean guard grabs Leia and brings her over to Jabba, now we're in a close-up, and that's where she's shoved towards us, and I stick the tongue out and go,
Yeah.
she's like, fuck.
Famous.
So it alternates between wide shots and close-ups.
Yeah.
So as I say, we did a lot of acting with Carrie. Some good, some bad. I mean, she even killing us and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
She was the main person we played with. We didn't really hang out with Harrison at all much. And of course, on a film set, you do normally get to hang out with people because there's so much long time waiting with lighting and all that sort of stuff that you mostly get to chat to people, either sharing a cigarette or a cup of coffee or whatever. We were pretty isolated. We would go in the morning, and apart from tea breaks, we would just be inside Jabba. So I know less about the people in the palace than I would on Dark Crystal. We all knew each other. We knew the dressers and the hair people, and you'd all get to know each other. But we were very isolated in the.
With the second shot, the second, obviously on the barge, was that the same model? Did they just have a second model in a different studio?
No, it's the same one.
Same one, just sort of wheeled
He
it.
moved twice. Yeah, he moved from the dais over the Rancor pit to behind the curtain near Harrison, and then he got moved to the barge set.
Yeah,
and the sets are all built off the ground, so that you can have puppeteers underneath, hand up through the floor and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
We would climb in from underneath, for instance. But I forget. I think I should look at the call sheets, but I think we spent about a couple of weeks in the main bit of the palace. We probably only spent 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
Doing Harrison, and we spent about a week in the barge, I think.
Right.
It was 4 or 5 weeks work altogether, but I think I did look at the call sheets, but I just don't remember.
Yeah. And obviously you got some very famous shots in there. Obviously the left hand, the tongue.
Well, I mean, you see, that's just for instance, hitting C-3PO, give you
Yeah.
an example of how tricksy it is.
Yeah.
I know I've got to hit him. First of all, they can't get a stuntman to fit in that costume because it's completely fixed for Anthony Daniels.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, yeah, perhaps they could get a stuntman, but they didn't anyway. It was going to be him doing it. So I'm going to endanger, a principal player. So, of course, I went outside to say, I can't see anything. I said, I can vaguely see where I am in black and white, but there's no 3D effect in a little tiny camera like that. I've got no sense. It's going to be muscle memory job. And Anthony said, well, I can't see anything. So the stunt coordinator's looking at us and going, so you're both working blind? And we went, yeah, more or less.
This could be interesting.
So what they did was they shot it from below and they put the camera down low, shooting upwards.
Yeah.
So they could take Anthony's legs off. So you're only seeing C-3PO from the waist up.
Yeah.
That meant, because if he fell over in that costume, you damaged the costume and probably hurt him too.
Yeah.
So yes, his legs are free. He could then stand on a mark, quite specific mark. And the fight coordinator guy said to me, "Can you do a block move? Can you move and stop?" And I'd done a bit of stage fighting and and I said, "Yeah, I can do that. I think, I'm not a karate expert, He said, "No, you can miss by 3 or 4 inches. We're shooting low and upwards, and as long as you stop and actually jerks back, it'll be fine." So we literally did it. We blocked the position while I was out there. We talked about how he was going to stand and where. Then I went back inside with the arm on, and we just slow motion did the moves. And I think we only did it once or twice. But it was pretty hairy at the time, to go. And Dave's looking at me going, "You're right." And I'm going, "Yeah, I think so." And then it's like 3, 2, 1, go. And I go, whoop, and Anthony flips backwards.
Yeah.
And they go, it's 10 seconds.
Yeah.
It's weird on films, you're hanging around for hours while they get everything right, cameras and lights and everything like that. And then you're doing 10 seconds. It's like the 100 meters in the Olympics.
Yeah.
You've trained for 4 years. Now you've got 10 seconds to prove it.
Yeah. That's it.
And those 10 seconds on screen, I'm very proud of.
Yeah.
But they were scary at the time. And, but it works. It's someone else's problem. I mean, my problem was only to do what I'm paid to do. That's It's someone else has to think it through and design it and plot it and plan it, and there were 2 guys standing behind Anthony in case he fell over.
I was gonna say, was there some crash mats there and all?
Yeah, all that. Yeah,
the trampoline just in case.
And it's all over in a flash, and you hardly even notice it in the thing. But
one shot as well is my 5-year-old who, he's only 5 now. He's watching Return of the Jedi last year, but it came out at the cinema. He loves the frog bit. So for him, was it a real frog? He picked up?
Well, again, it's the magic of movies. There's 3 different frogs.
Yeah.
There's a real frog in the hooker, which was some big giant frog from London Zoo, which you'll see swimming around occasionally. You'll notice it moving. The frog I put in my mouth, in Jabba's mouth, is a rubber frog.
Yeah.
And the close up that you see of the hand going in, pick out the Tatooine paddy frog, was added later, probably by ILM in America or something, because it doesn't actually match. The frog that I'm holding it is nothing like a paddy frog. They'd made that later, and someone else is just doing that arm close up, picking up shot.
Picking up.
Oh, so, continuity error.
It's a continuity error. If you look for it now, it'll annoy you. But there you go. From my point of view, it was a bit tricksy because I had to turn the head to the left and then tip it down. Then I reach out of shot where someone hands me the frog because I can't find anything.
Yeah.
Then I'm squaring the head up while I bring the hand up. Dave opens the mouth. I'm letting go of the head now. Dave opens the mouth. I push the frog in. he starts chewing, and while he's chewing, I'm getting my hand in the tongue to lick the lips afterwards.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
oh,
So
wow.
you can see it's one of those, it's one of
Yeah,
those.
proper coordinated, isn't it?
Yeah, and there was one shot there actually, funnily enough, that they didn't use, which I like, because sometimes you do things and you think it's brilliant, but the editor, decides not. What it was on the very first take that I did, I was so busy thinking about the tongue and my right hand that I just shoved the frog in the mouth and then let go of it. Well, it left a leg sticking out. So when Dave started doing the chewing, this leg's going,
Oh, wow.
right? So by the time I'm sticking the tongue out, this frog is, they're going, no, cut, stop. And then they all went into one of those little huddles of discussion.
What the fuck?
Is that good? Is that, no, we don't like that. So they said to me, no, you've got to get the frog right in the mouth. I go, okay. Do another take.
Yeah.
I reach out straight. Now the frog is greasy because the mouth was all full of this gunge, right? So now the frog is like holding a piece of soap with my 3 fingers. And so I'm hanging on to the frog like this and bringing it up. And Dave opens the mouth and I shove it in. And if you see the take that they used, you'll see that I kind of, like tuck the leg in.
Yeah.
I shove it in, but I make sure he's gone before I take the hand away. And then we lick the lips. But I mean, just see a simple thing like that is actually, first of all, as I say, 3 different frogs, and quite a complicated piece of coordination.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I was going to ask actually, Toby, was there anything that you filmed it, either like a very short scene or something that you thought was good that made it onto the cutting floor? Basically, was there anything that we missed out seeing?
Well, I'd have to look at it again. I get the feeling people are always talking to me about the hooker. I get the feeling you don't actually see him smoking the hooker. Not really. There may be a shot where he's holding it very briefly at the beginning, but you don't ever see him go.
No.
I feel like there's pictures in books maybe where it's like kind of smoking and he's holding it maybe, but in the film, you might be right.
No, I'm sure we filmed a smoking piece because Richard Padbury was under the stage with a cigar and a rubber tube. There's no clever special effects. Literally, one of the builders is right beneath us with a cigar, blowing smoke through a tube. Now, he's definitely in the making of. You'll see him saying, "Now, if I had a glass of port, this would be the perfect job." Actually, he was green by the end of the day, because you can imagine. But because I know we shot for some time. And we were choking because the smoke was coming up from under the stage into the hole and trapped in Jabba. So we definitely filmed some smoking sequence bit, but I don't have a vivid memory of it. And I get the feeling that when I watched it, I went, I felt slightly robbed. I'm sure there's some beautiful scene there somewhere with smoke trickling out of his mouth.
Yeah.
I feel like, is it maybe the first establishing shot of him? Maybe he's got it on the go. I feel like
I think but it's not a close up. It's not a proper smoker's shot.
No.
You know what I mean? Which I'm sure we filmed. We did film one where he was enjoying his smoke.
I bet you were like, pack it in, Padbury. We can't breathe up here. Come on.
Yeah, more or less.
That's brilliant. Was there, like, a lot of people have always said George Lucas was on set kind of a lot, maybe the old parlance over Richard Marquand's shoulder. Did you see a lot of that at all, or was it just purely Richard up there?
Well, there's 2 things there. One is we didn't come out very much. So if he'd really lurked, we wouldn't have. On the other hand, George Lucas didn't come on the set without everyone going, "George's here." Right. So I think he definitely popped in, but his attitude, because he's quite a quiet man, really. His attitude was, "I'm not here." And you go, "Yes, sure, you are." But I don't. He may well have had a word with Richard Marquand here and there. And I know he didn't particularly like the practical Jabba. Rumor had it that he wanted to do stop motion or CGI or whatever, but he just didn't have the technology. And he resented the fact that Jabba couldn't walk about and all that. Anyway, they're all rumors, because I never spoke to him and I never saw him. Well, I saw him at a distance. But I think when he came on the set once or twice, we would hear, George is here. I go, what? So I'm going to do a better performance or something? Thanks for making me nervous. You know, I didn't
You try wearing this outfit. Come on.
Yeah, I didn't need to know that actually.
Well, obviously he got his wish in the end, didn't he? Obviously, the CGI Jabba in both the Phantom Menace and inserted into the original Star Wars, wasn't it as well?
Yeah, but they don't look good.
No.
I mean, the first one was really awful. I mean, it's just actually bad CGI. He could improve that now if he insists on having that shot. The one in the Phantom Menace is kind of all right. It sort of looks all right. The sculpt is more or less like John's sculpt, but it doesn't have any what's the word? Doesn't have any presence. My problem with CGI, it doesn't have any weight. Our Jabba looks as though he smells. He looks as though he's disgusting. His drool is literally trickling down. You know what I mean? And he looks like he weighs half a ton, and he does. He actually weighs half a ton. Plus, we can interact. I mean, I grab Bib Fortuna at some point, and I'm, you know, for the actors, it's much easier. Whereas in the Phantom Menace, he's kind of isolated.
Yeah,
and
he's on a podium, isn't he? And
he's not interacting with humans comical. And this is a personal bugbear here. Sorry, all these spoilers I'm putting in, they're not to do with the plot, they're to do with continuity, aren't they? Our three-fingered thing was part of making a real alien, an alien that was more than just a humanoid with a funny head. You know, Jabba is distinctly alien. He speaks alien, and he doesn't look like, you know, Bib Fortuna looks like a human being with a funny head, let's face it. C-3PO is like a man in a tin suit. What I love about Jabba is he's genuinely alien. You've never seen anything like him.
Yeah.
And the three-finger bit was part of that. Now, if you look in Phantom Menace, they've given him what I call a Mickey Mouse hand, a Disney hand, which is 3 fingers and a thumb. Because then when he points, you see that, okay? When we pointed, we had to do that, which it looks weird, but I mean, that's what you had to do because he's an alien.
Yeah.
And I don't like the Mickey Mouse hand in Phantom Menace. It annoys me. It's a bit humanoid. You know, it just stops him being quite so alien.
Yeah.
It's a tiny thing that nobody else cares about, but I am the left hand and I care.
I think that's fair enough.
That's
absolutely fair.
Oh man, amazing stuff.
So what was it like when you saw the first viewing of the film? Then obviously you're going to be very excited to see all of your scenes, etc. But what was it like to? Was it a cast and crew?
Yes, cast and crew in Leicester Square. So first of all, the whole audience is cast and crew. Some of whom we'd met, of course. But it's also secretive and compartmentalized. There were all kinds of people. We had no idea who they were. I mean, Ben Burt was there, but, you know, I didn't know he'd done sound effects for us afterwards. All the Ewok people were there, of course, that we had met because I'd met all the little people on Dark Crystal. So I used to socialize with them. And I did sneak into the Ewok village once. All the sets were very blocked off, but I think Mike Edmonds took me through to see the Ewok village. So there were lots of familiar faces, and we hadn't seen each other for 18 months. So that was nice. That was, you know, even in the foyer, it's going, hey! But none of us knew what we'd achieved because, well, we didn't get to see the rushes, and, you know, we didn't know really what we'd done. And plus there's the editing. I mean, there was at least one actor there who'd been edited out, you know. I mean, he played all the scenes. He's not in the movie, you know. I mean, this stuff happens. This is films. But for me, it was exciting. First of all, I still thought although I knew we were a major player now and not just a background character, I still thought we were going to be on the screen for maybe 5 minutes. I didn't know we were going to be the first third of the movie, more or less. First of all, people are talking about us because they're coming to the palace and all that, and all the Gamorrean guards and all the entourage. But, you know, if we were an actor, if it was my face, that would be a lot of screen time for a George Lucas movie. You know, Jabba's quite central. Plus, we didn't know about the Hutties. Okay.
Yeah, what was that like when you heard it?
Well, it was a fantastic voice, and of course, it got us. And I looked at Dave and went, he just shrugged. He wasn't upset, really. I mean, he knew it wasn't going to be his voice. I guess he might have secretly been hoping it was his voice tweaked. Yeah. But there was a very good chance it was going to be dubbed. But it was so effective that we weren't really worried. We were sitting there crowd is, when I hit C3PO and everyone goes, "Ooh," you got a whole cinema going, "Ooh." So it's like, that's me, that is.
Amazing.
So yeah, fun in that sense. Plus we get the plot and we get to hear the rest of the story.
Yeah. So I assume that with the script, you're just seeing your page. You have no idea what the story's about. Just literally
No, didn't know
page.
anything.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough, I hadn't actually seen the first two movies when they offered me this job. Unlike most people with kids or whatever, between 77 and 80, 81 when we got the job, I worked most evenings. I was a juggler. I used to do medieval banquets and things like that. And I just didn't go to cinema, but really. And I'd heard about them. And, of course, they were very, very popular. But I didn't particularly think it was my kind of thing. I had nothing against them. I just hadn't got around to seeing them. So when he told me it's the third Star Wars, I had to go out. No DVDs, no streaming, no nothing. I had to go out and find a cinema that had a double bill on of the first two movies. And can you imagine? I go into a cinema, proper Dolby sound, big screen and all that, and I watched the first two Star Wars movies for the first time.
Yeah.
And go, and I'm going to be in the third.
Yeah.
I walked out of there going, whoa.
Yeah.
Because at that point, I hadn't even seen Dark Crystal. So, I was very new to the film business. And to feel like I was already making films but hadn't seen any. So then I saw those first two, and they are really good. I like the original trilogy. I'm not such a fan of the follow-ons, but that's a whole other story. But as you know, the first two Star Wars movies are pretty good.
Yeah, very definitely.
And they're particularly good in a cinema. Most of us now watch it on, on TVs and things like that. It's all right, but there's something about the big screen and the sound, plus watching it with 500 people.
Yes.
It's a different experience, And to watch those first two back to back, literally over 4 or 5 hours, whatever it is, I came out in shock, really.
Like you won the lottery.
Wow. And I'm going to be in the third one. I still didn't think I was going to be very big in the third one, but anything in the third one would have been fun. I would have been happy to be a walk-on background character.
Absolutely.
To then find out you're a major star that's become a mythical beast is a whole lot of... That's when I go back to, that's when I go back to, it's actually 15 of us. So, it's
still popular to this day.
Keep it humble.
Yeah.
Well, not all of them got to knock over C3PO, Toby. Let's put it that way.
This is true. This is true.
Got a new Jabba the Hutt figure coming out in September. So there you go. It doesn't stop. Yeah. There you go. Well,
I'm not a collector, to be honest. I've been given one or two things and I tend to give them away again afterwards. I'm just not a hoarder.
Yeah.
I've got nothing against it, and I understand people's fascination with it. And I've met lots of really keen people, and I've seen some lovely models. There's a couple of the really big Jabbas that are just fantastic,
Yeah.
But it's just not my thing. I'm not a collector of objects. I guess because I lived on the move for so long. When I was a juggler and a clown and all, I was kind of wandering around the UK and wandering around Europe and rented rooms, and I stayed pretty portable. I had 2 suitcases. One suitcase was my axe, the other suitcase was a change of clothes and a book and a thing and a thing. Wow. So I didn't really accumulate lots of stuff.
Yeah,
and it's remained my habit to not gather a lot of stuff together.
Right.
Probably for the best, Toby, because my missus gives me earache every week about the stuff I've got. So.
But no, I mean, as I say, I understand it. When I very first went to a convention, I was going. People were saying, "Oh, there'll be weird people." And I go, "No, 99%. Of course, there's the odd weird person, but there's the odd weird person on the bus, isn't there?" Let's face it. Most of the convention fans I've met are fantastic and they're really nice. Not only are they nice because they're being nice to me, but fantastic. And the cosplay stuff that's built up over the last 10 years is astonishing. Yeah. One of the few things you don't see, of course, is a cosplay Jabba, because that's just about impossible.
I was going to say, have you ever seen one?
I have, and it looked like a man in a sleeping bag. There's an inflatable one that you can get in America.
Oh, right.
One man Jabba, which is just a head and an inflatable thing, but it's a little bit silly.
Yeah.
I've seen some life-size Jabba sculpts, but they're not animated. They're not. You can't get inside them. But for posing with, all the layers in the world love posing with a life-size Jabba.
Yeah.
And I've met one or two. I don't know exactly how many there are. There's probably about 3 or 4 altogether. There's one or two that are not quite as good sculpts, but they're still scale, which is nice. I've seen one or two that are really quite good, and then the one in Madame Tussauds is uncanny. That's really amazing. But
Yeah.
they've really nailed it. I mean, they've exactly copied John's sculpt.
Yeah.
So I get my photo taken with big Jabbas sometimes, but I've never seen a proper Jabba cosplay. It's probably not going to happen. I mean, if it could have been done that way, we'd have done it that way in the first place.
I was going to say maybe the inflatable costume that was the one they used in the Phantom Menace, maybe.
It was all right. It was all right. I mean, there are some creatures that are just harder to mimic. I know Simon's little blue elephant, a piano player.
Oh, Max Rebo.
Yeah, he's quite rare as a cosplayer as well.
Oh,
I've seen one.
Oh.
I've seen one. But as Simon points out, he's not a 4-limbed creature. What you're calling his hands are actually his feet. He's actually sitting in the original movie. It's just a head and a body, and he's playing the piano with his legs. So I think they tweaked. I think they've tweaked him as well. I think they've given him 4 limbs in the model. But you can't argue with these things. It's the way people see it. Anyway, I mustn't start telling Simon's stories. You have to talk to Simon about Simon's stories. He has a lot of stories too.
Well, that's fantastic, man. Thank you very much for sharing. It was amazing. One of the favorite characters and getting all the insights.
Cool.
But just before we do get out of it, Paolo, tell Toby what you told me recently about having Jabba as the little icon. He might get a kick out of it.
So like I said, my 5-year-old, he really likes Jabba. He calls him the big slug and stuff. And then on Disney Plus, you can set your profile picture, and he set mine to Jabba. And then my wife, she says, why are you this ugly fat thing? Like, why can't you just, because she's got no idea about Star Wars. And then my 5-year-old pipes up, he's a slug. And then I went, yeah, he's a slug. So well, why are you? It's like, well, he wanted me to be Jabba, and that's it. So we had this little argument, and my 5-year-old is he calls it, he doesn't call him Jabba, he calls him the slug. So that's he's standing up for him.
Well, it's something that I say to people, when they say, is it fun being a baddie? I go, my thing for Jabba is, unlike the goodies and baddies, the black hats and white hats, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Jabba isn't evil. He's not evil like Darth Vader and the Emperor and all that sort of stuff. He's a comedy villain. He's like Sidney Greenstreet in The Maltese Falcon or something like that. He is frightening, but I mean, it's interesting that a 5-year-old likes him. Do you know what I mean? Like, doesn't hide behind the sofa. He's funny. He's kind of he's not a comedy villain exactly, because I think he just finds it just quite intriguing, because it's like you were saying earlier about aliens, and just these things that like nothing like it. And I think like you said with Yoda, and like obviously we're now with Grogu, and you know what I mean. Like there's just something about this being completely alien. And I think kids love it, Yeah, you can just react to it differently because it isn't a nasty human. You're never going to meet anyone like this.
No. But
and he's wicked. He's a pirate. He's the same as Han Solo.
Yeah.
They both go to the highest bidder.
Yeah.
You offer him enough money, he'd work for Leia. It's just money.
Yeah.
And he's a hedonist. Of course, he smokes and he drinks and we don't really know how he has sex, but he obviously gets turned on by something.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fun playing not an evil person, but just wicked, just naughty, irresponsible, or amoral, or whatever the word is.
Yeah.
And it just there is a touch of humour in there, isn't there? Just a bit.
That's it.
Yeah,
Totally.
definitely. Yeah, my favourite decoration. He's got a sense of humour, you know.
Yeah.
Toby, absolutely brilliant. Thank you for joining us on the show. And yeah, hopefully maybe we'll speak again in the future.
Yeah, fantastic.
Starting our approach, deactivate the security shield.
Security deflective shield will be deactivated when we have confirmation of your code transmission. Stand by.